I'm Francois Moreau, 57, priest for almost 30 years. In little villages, parishes without you, and hospitals where suffering blared more than prayers, I served. But no experience, homily, or prayer night prepared me for what I saw in front of the Basilica of Our Lady. This is not lyrical or exaggerated. It still makes my heart shake when I think about it. That night started like many others. Clear skies, lovely weather, the faithful gathering on the steps in small groups for the novena. I arrived with my rosary, ready to lead the mysteries on an ordinary night of prayer. No hint of what was to follow. I remember a woman offering me a candle, a youngster running about the fountain, and a young couple sitting silently in the rear, possibly looking for something they couldn't name. Everything was usual until it wasn't. A chilly air hit me midway through the second decade. Not unusual for the season, but wind and weather couldn't explain it. It was quiet. The silence after a prayer is not what I mean. Silence was nearly palpable. Children's laughter ceased. Tourists stopped talking. The usual distant automobiles disappeared. Basilica bells, which sound on the hour, were silent. Everyone seemed to sense something was wrong when I looked around. The atmosphere altered like the sky was bowing to us. Then a voice, perhaps a woman's or a teenager's, whispered, "Look at the sky." We looked up above Notre Dame's dome and clouds began to form, but not like a storm. They seemed to move gently, like sails pulled by invisible hands. Behind them appeared a soft, warm, welcoming light, a light that did not blind but filled the soul. A 6 or 7-year-old boy with dark eyes and a serious expression pulled on my cassock and asked in a low voice, "Father, is she smiling at us?" I don't know how long we stayed like that. Maybe a minute, maybe 10. Time had lost all meaning. All that existed was the open sky, the living light, and the silhouette we recognized without needing to understand. It was the Virgin Mary, Our Lady, and she was there. As the light faded and the clouds returned, the silence lingered for a few more moments. Then, like a collective sigh, the crowd caught its breath. People were kissing, praying aloud, and crying. I sat on the steps, holding the rosary, my heart still suspended. That night, something changed forever. But there was something different about this emptiness. It wasn't as if she had left. It was as if she were still there, invisible but present. The light had disappeared, yes, the form was no longer visible, but something remained, a warmth in the chest, a calm that was difficult to explain. And that silence, yes, the silence still hung in the air. A silence that was not the absence of sound, but a fullness of meaning. None of us wanted to break it. No one dared raise their voice, and yet we all knew. Something had changed forever in this place. I stood there, motionless, trying to understand, not with my mind, which failed miserably, but with my heart. And then a woman approached me. Her name was Claire. I knew her well, a retired teacher, faithful to Mary's vows, who had been attending the novena for years. She walked with difficulty and almost always carried a small blanket for her legs. This time she had nothing in her hands. She just looked at me and said, her eyes moist, "She looked at me, Father, I felt it here." And she pointed to her chest. Like a hug without arms. It moved me tremendously. However, another individual approached before I could react. Instead of talking to me, a line formed spontaneously to convey their feelings. Several reported seeing the curtain flutter. Others said the Virgin cried. A simple suited man trembled as he remarked, "She stared at me and I felt guilty. Not scared. I felt she saw me as I am and loved me." We all felt that. Love. Personal, intimate, profound love, not generic. This presence seemed to know everyone. Like she had come to greet, not fear. To remind, not punish. Remember what? That we have a mother and are not forgotten. Although cell phones were once omnipresent, I saw that many were now forgetting them. Many tried to film, but nothing was clear. A young girl, Juliet, showed me her recording. Dark screen, shaking, muted sound. Nothing showed what we saw. Sighing, she continued, "Maybe it wasn't for the eyes but for the heart." She grinned. A serene, transformed smile. Stayed there long. Not many wanted to leave. We prayed. We sung gently. Some reclined on the basilica steps to sleep under that sky. It was a faith-based, unstructured retreat. I understood then. Around us life went on. Cars resumed passing. Streetlights turned on. Urban noise returned. Still we were out of time. Something larger reverberated that night, so no one missed the basilica bells. Something no tower or metal could replicate. It was the certainty that heaven had briefly touched earth. At that time all our hearts were touched. No words, just looks and tears. The sky was dark again, with a few stars and the church dome visible. Instead of the image, we kept its echo. We had never heard a stronger echo. I gazed up at the sky because my body was forcing me up, like if something inside me was still hoping and searching. To everyone's surprise, it reappeared softer than before. After appearing to vanish, the clouds slowly and mysteriously gathered again. The clouds' silvery borders gleamed like light textiles. She reformed in that hushed warmth. Astonishment filled the crowd. Not a yell or hysteria, but something precious, like a prayer coming from the chest without lips. The figure was clear. Long veil, flowing cloak, arms extended to welcome everyone. However, something new had appeared. As if beating like a heart, a warm, encompassing golden light emanated from the figure's chest. We all felt it. We felt light passing through. Behind me, a woman knelt and cried. Her shoulders were supported, but she shook her head and said, "No, leave me, this is what I need. This is what I've been waiting for all my life." The apparition continued longer and everyone stayed immobile. No one snapped photos. No one glanced aside. It felt like the world had vanished. In perfect communion, we stared at the one looking back at us. I felt it. She saw everything with a love that sees concealed grief, unconfessed sin, strangled nostalgia, and dread we never admit. Despite this, her look was not condemning. They were merciful and caring. A young woman I didn't know was holding a rosary, but she seemed fixated on the sky. She whispered almost to herself, "It's her. Really, she came. The mother is here." Yes, the mother walks with the suffering, cries with us when we lose someone, waits patiently when we stray, and holds us tight when we return. It seemed impossible to breathe with my chest full. Also, I had never breathed so softly. It was as if all my sermon words had come to life before my eyes. The vision faded again, but not like fog. It faded as if returning to a dimension we don't belong to, saying, "Now you have seen, now you know." When everything returned to normal, if it ever did, a small child holding his mother's hand said, "Mommy, why didn't she stay forever?" The mother knelt down, kissed the boy's head and said, "She stayed, my love, here." She pointed to her chest. I turned. I surveyed the crowd. Most were kneeling, but some were embracing. Some stared at the empty sky like they were dreaming. I knew it wasn't a dream. The Virgin Mary appeared, but no one could see her anymore. People didn't applaud, shout, or rise up as the light went out. Her picture vanished from the sky, but what she left behind was more genuine than anything seen. It felt like the Blessed Mother had entered us like a breath in the soul that purifies, burns, and heals. We started murmuring slowly. It was timid and barely noticeable at first. Though few lips moved, dozens and then hundreds of voices joined in. The Hail Mary prayer, said with faith and vulnerability, seemed to flow from the ground. We became a living basilica in front of St. Peter's Basilica. Hail Mary, full of grace. Many prayed in tears. It was not sad. The sadness of those who had a religious experience and felt tiny in the face of the mystery that touched them without explanation was it. After leading prayers so many times, I remained mute because I realized I no longer needed to. This prayer came from the people, like a fresh spring after years of drought. The French, frequently spiritually wounded, prayed again like a child reunited with its mother. A middle-aged woman trembled quietly among the believers. I asked her how she was. Before I could speak, she glanced at me with reddened eyes and murmured, "Father, I haven't prayed in 20 years. 20 years. But today I knelt down and couldn't stop. I stopped in front of her. I made the sign of the cross on her forehead and whispered, 'She waited for you and you came back.'" A little further on, a man with a cane left his cane leaning against the wall and was walking slowly without support. His children watched him, open-mouthed. He smiled. The singing began spontaneously. Someone sang a passage from the Salve Regina. Others sang the Magnificat. And the night became a living temple, a collective heart, a liturgy of the soul. There were no instruments or giant screens. There was only the sky, the moon, the echo of the apparition, and faith. Faith that had been dormant in many hearts for a few minutes now shone brightly. I knelt in the middle of the staircase, took a deep breath, and started crying as a man, not as a priest. I realized we were within a miracle, not simply witnesses. Even when the world forgets to pray, Mary never forgets to appear. The church clock showed that it was late, but no one wanted to leave. Families gathered, strangers embraced, and young people sat silently on the floor with rosary beads. It was as if we were in another time, world, or place where heaven had touched earth and left its mark, including restored faith and a people kneeling, praying like never before. The apparition, spontaneous prayer, and silence more eloquent than words seemed to have peaked, but then something even more unexpected happened. Mrs. Elise Dufour, a woman I had known for years, sat at the back of the church, always smiling despite her pain. Her gray hair was always well combed, her hands were delicate, and that nightfall she stood discreetly next to her daughter, hands on knees, rosary in hand, eyes to the sky. Just enjoying her serenity, I watched her from afar. An unexpected movement around her attracted my attention. Her standing daughter turned abruptly. Her expression changed. She dropped and widened her eyes, stepping back. Some approached, but others froze. I stepped forward to see. Mrs. Elise stood alone, unaided, with her arms slightly wide, as if balancing on the miracle. I froze. For a moment I thought it was impossible, that I was weary, unhappy, or wrong. Then she grinned. It was a rare smile. A smile that seemed to express ultimate thanks. She said. She looked at me, firmly. It was sensed. Up I went. Her daughter kneeled. A girl next to her cried. A baseball cap-wearing child quickly made the cross sign to shield his heart from the shock. I didn't sure whether to cry, pray, or just hang out, wondering. Elise took 2 cautious, trembling steps like a relearning to walk. She stared at the Virgin Mary statue at the basilica entrance, and knelt after touching her daughter's shoulder. The already faithful throng was overcome by emotion. Weeping stifled applause, prayers interrupted by tears. Something had finally overflowed, as if the sky were saying, "Now you have seen, now you know." Eliza, kneeling, prayed, "My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior." Others grieved, but all felt the same. I, who had read so much about healings in the saints' books, heard testimonies, and celebrated the Eucharist with faith, was now standing before a woman who had been healed by the Mother of Heaven. The news spread quickly, and others began to report changes. A woman with chronic shoulder pain could move her arm easily. A man with hearing problems could hear every word. A young girl with panic attacks said she felt completely at peace. But nothing was as clear, visible, or striking as seeing Elise standing there. Her feet were firmly planted, her heart was light, and, after Elise stood up, as if she had risen from the floor in years of pain and waiting, the emotion spread like a fire of faith. It was hard to know where to look. Every face was a story, every tear a response, and every simple gesture was a miracle. Then something strange happened. Many of those present, including young people who had come more out of curiosity than devotion, took their phones out of their pockets. Some wanted to film the crowd in prayer. Others tried to record the sky, hoping to see the Virgin again. Some might have been seeking proof of what was happening. The girl said, "My video is all black, as if it had been deleted." A middle-aged man showed me his phone screen. It was just a blurry spot of light, shaking, darkness, and no sound. Nothing we had experienced appeared. Others tried again, changed positions, and used other apps, but the results were always the same. Distorted, incomplete, absurd images. While the machines failed, the hearts were fully awake. A young woman, clearly disappointed at not being able to record anything, looked at me and said with touching simplicity, "Father, maybe she wanted us to see her with faith, not with a camera." Those words struck me like a bolt of lightning. Faith is lived, felt, and cannot be captured on video or transmitted via Bluetooth. One of a group of frustrated teenagers wearing a gray hoodie said, "The images are all going black. It's like something's blocking them." I smiled and said, "Maybe it's because when faced with the sacred, the most powerful lens is still the one in your heart." He remained silent, put his phone in his pocket, and knelt again. Several followed suit. The move was natural. People put down their cameras, as if they realized eternity doesn't need proof. Our souls were already etched with what we had experienced there. Later, many showed me their botched filming attempts in the parish hall. They all reported dark, frozen, fuzzy visuals. However, one detail intrigued me. Recorders with higher faith gave up their phones and returned to prayer faster. Not resignation but understanding. One woman smiled and remarked, "The mother doesn't want to be filmed, Father, she wants to be felt." What more could we ask? We saw and felt her, and no one can take that away. Even if the world doubts, the records are destroyed, and nothing can be proven. We know because the phones became silent and the heart spoke. After the phones failed, so it seemed like the sky refused to be videotaped, the audience went silent again. Night appeared frozen. Even though the breeze was light, everyone felt something was happening. I saw her then. Secluded in the right corner of the stairs, she sat alone. Hands folded on knees, shoulders hunched. She wasn't crying, but her eyes were locked on a spot in the sky, as if she was waiting for a response she no longer wanted. Annette, 72, was widowed for 8 years and estranged from the church for almost a decade. I knew her. Annette was closed off when I visited her residence once or twice at the suggestion of her sister, a parish activist. Since her husband died and her son went for overseas years ago without a word, she said God had gone quiet and she could no longer pray. She was broken inside yet stood up like a shipwreck survivor. I heard her sister forced her to come that night. The whole time she was silent, not singing, praying, or displaying emotion. Something transformed her. A hushed gasp of amazement broke the silence while everyone was seated or kneeling. I turned around and saw Annette, hands over her face, crying hot tears like a long-lost kid. I ran to her. "Annette, are you okay?" I asked, not knowing what to expect. She took a while to answer. She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears, and said, "She spoke to me, my father." Silence. Everyone around us fell silent when they heard those words. I moved closer. "Who spoke to you, Annette?" She pointed to the sky, then her ribs. "The mother." I shivered. "And what did she say?" Annette closed her eyes, took a long breath, and muttered. "She said that I am still loved despite everything, that my son is not lost, that God heard me every time, even when I was silent." She fell to her knees and the walls fell down. This woman, who had been closed off for so long, full of wounds, rebellion, and silence, surrendered herself to her mother with a simplicity that moved even the most skeptical. Some hugged her. Her sister knelt beside her, crying. I placed my hand on her head and prayed silently. "Our Lady, blessed are you for your visit, you who heal." Later, almost at dawn, she got up, squeezed my hand tightly, and said, "Father, something has been torn from me, a weight, a shadow. I feel light, alive, and at peace." I didn't answer. I just smiled because I knew. I had seen it with my own eyes. She had been comforted and healed. The next morning the city was different. The streets still had cobblestones, the shops were still open, and the buses ran on the same schedule, but there was a new silence in the air, a reverence that is not imposed but felt. And that's when I realized hope had returned. The basilica opened earlier than ever that morning, and even before the sun warmed the square stones, a line had formed to enter, pray, or just be there. I saw men in suits with red eyes, women with flowers in their hands, and children pulling their parents impatiently, as if they were longing for someone they had just met. A taxi driver who never visited a church exited with his grandfather's rosary, saying, "Father, I dreamed about her. I heard her voice but didn't see her. She said, 'I am where I am called with faith.' I woke up in tears and came straight here." A young woman from Marseille took 3 trains to Paris, didn't know anyone, and had never been inside the basilica. She sat on the floor for 5 hours, eyes closed, forehead on hands. Later she told me, "I was abused as a child. Not told anyone. Today I told Mary and I felt clean for the first time." A dormant faith was awakening, the silent faith of our grandparents, the faith that goes to war, the faith that resists abandonment, secularization, and indifference. And now it was coming back with power, like a river overflowing after years of being dammed up. In the confessional, lines formed spontaneously. That evening, we held an open-air mass in front of the basilica. It was supposed to be simple, but the faithful came from everywhere, on foot, by bus, and even in improvised caravans. We prayed under the stars, thousands of voices singing, "Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us poor sinners." I looked at the crowd, candles in hand, and saw a sea of illuminated souls, each flame a heart touched. In front of Our Lady, among the flowers, candles, and tears, I realized she had stayed. The next day, when the basilica bells rang, I felt they were calling to something greater. I knew I had to tell the bishop, not out of formality, but out of respect for the sacred. I wrote a simple report that afternoon, but with a heavy heart. How could I put an apparition onto paper? A silence that heals, a miracle that seeks no proof, only acceptance? I did it anyway. I described what I had seen with my own eyes. I recounted the moment when the light appeared between the clouds. On the last line I whispered, "Your Excellency, if there is proof that heaven still visits earth, this was it." I mailed the document and waited. The next morning the rectory phone rang. It was him. "Father Francois, I have read everything and I confess I had to stop twice to wipe away my tears. I know that the protocols of the church are clear. I know that miracles must be investigated with caution, but—" He paused for a long time. "What happened there does not require confirmation, it requires reverence." We remained silent for a few seconds, which statement gave me shivers. Archbishop representatives arrived that week. They were respected and believed in. Ordinary folks, young people, doctors, and neighbors who weren't there on the apparition night, said they felt an unexplained call in the hours that followed. They made notes, answered questions, watched movies without graphics, and reviewed the healed woman's medical records. Everything was done the right way, but I saw silent admiration on their faces because there is no protocol to explain sincere tears, no report to measure a soul restored to hope, no scientific analysis to explain a woman's sparkle in her eyes after decades of silence. That evening, a young Mariology priest on the commission asked me, "Father Francois, can I be honest?" Of course. He looked around. The Virgin was surrounded by dozens of silent worshippers. Some prayed, while others stood still as if time had stopped. I have studied apparitions all my life. I have written theses, analyzed ancient accounts. But never have I seen anything like this. It is not just a fact, it is a presence. And I nodded. Indeed, he was right. Even if the Vatican never recognizes her, the newspapers forget, and time passes, her presence remains. The mother changed lives, reshaped hearts, and healed what the eyes cannot see, and that cannot be erased. Late that night I went home. No one was on the steps anymore. The candles were gathered. The singing stopped. Night air silenced everything almost sacredly. But something inside me remained lit, inexplicable, and refused to sleep. I sat in the sacristy's old chair. I placed my rosary on the table and sat alone, breathing in the familiar silence. But the silence wasn't empty. The same silence as when she appeared. The pre-eternal silence. I now understand that silence is heaven bending down to us. I recalled everything. The light between the clouds, her face, the woman who stood up, the broken phones, the crowd that prayed like never before. The woman healed in her soul, the city's faith revived, and the bishop listened to the people's hearts without proof. I wondered why now? Why here? Why us? Maybe the question is wrong. Perhaps we should ask, why not now? Why not here? Why not us? We live in times of disbelief. Times when voices are loud but hearts are empty. Times when faith seems to belong to another century. Times when many abandon Mary, but she abandons no one. That night, in the Basilica of Our Lady, the Mother of Heaven came down among her children. Not to demand, not to judge, but to remind us. To remind us that we are still loved, that we still have a place to return to, that faith is not dead. It is simply sleeping in many hearts, and that all it takes is an apparition, a glance, a breath of grace for miracles to be reborn. I don't know if the world will believe what I am saying. I don't know if anyone will read these words with faith or skepticism, but I know what I saw, and even more, I know what I felt. I know the warmth that filled my chest. I know the peace that filled the stone steps. I know the light that did not blind but healed. I know the presence that cannot be measured, but can be recognized. And that is why I say with all my soul, with all my years of priesthood, with all the humility of my heart, she was here. She is here, she remains here, not in some distant heaven, but among the people, in the tears of those who have rediscovered their faith, in the healing of those who had lost hope, in the silence that spoke louder than any sermon. The Virgin Mary appeared above the Basilica of Our Lady, and it was not to be celebrated. It was to wake us up, like a mother calling her lost child. Like a lighthouse in the fog. Like a flame that warms when the world grows cold. I am only a priest, but now more than ever I am a witness. A witness that heaven still speaks, that faith still transforms, that Mary's love still visits this weary earth. And if you who are listening to me or reading this feel something within you, even if you don't know what it is, even if you doubt, even if you have strayed, know this. She still sees you, she still hears you, she still waits for you. Because when a mother loves, she always comes back. If this story has touched your heart, if listening to it has made you feel something different inside, a warmth, a memory, a tear you didn't even know you had, then write a comment with faith and courage. She is still here. Let's fill this page with testimonials, words of love for our Mother in heaven, hearts that do not forget that Mary walks with us, even when the world seems to forget her.